Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC. Call 0345 6060 973.
8 is the time. Let's come away from events in Ukraine and come back here to the United Kingdom. The latest figure I have is of heartwarming 122,000 people stepping forward to offer homes for refugees. But someone who'll be far greater informed than I is Conservative MP, formerly Richard, now Lord Harrington, who's Minister for Refugees and joins me now. If I can start with the number, Minister, is it still at around 122,000 or has it been swelled even more? Good morning.
Well, good morning, Nick. That was the number I got last night, but it was growing rapidly. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's more. We've been overwhelmed by the way the British people have stepped forward. It was new to us. I mean, I would have been very glad for it to be 20,000, and we're now at this number. So I'm very excited about it.
Now, it's worth reminding the listeners, you've effectively had this gig before. You were brought in by then Prime Minister David Cameron. You were responsible for settling refugees from Syria back in 2016. Lord Harrington, what are the similarities in this case and what are the differences?
Well, Nick, the similarities, I'm afraid, are human tragedy. The differences are the scale of it and the fact that we have been able to, in Syria, if I could just briefly explain, in Syria,
Sure.
we basically, people were in Jordan, countries around, they were predominantly in camps. So we were able to assess on a humanitarian basis, vulnerability, etc. We were able to charter aircraft, bring people in, and we pre-organised the accommodation and all of the services around it. We had time to do that because people were in, however tragic it was, they were in relative safety. In this case, there's such a huge, overwhelming number in the countries around Ukraine. It's growing dramatically every day. We've had to do things on a far greater scale and, frankly, on a much more emergency basis. And that's why we've stepped forward and asked the British public to get involved on just an unprecedented scale.
You cite figures quite rightly. I believe more than 3 million Ukrainians are already on the move. That number is probably going to become greater. Is there a cap that the government is considering, or will it be open door policy?
There is no cap at all. The only cap is basically accommodation that we have, and we'll make sure, hook by crook, that the suitable facilities are available. Because it's not just accommodation. You know, these people are traumatised. As far as we know, people may need medical attention, counselling, assimilation, and telling them what this country's like, because it's very different to the way that they've been living. So we have to make sure that when they land, they arrive at an airport or indeed by coach, many of them will be arriving at Victoria Coach Station, that there's the right facilities to receive them.
But you mentioned healthcare. You'll be aware, Lord Harrington, following the coronavirus pandemic, there's enormous pressure on our NHS to provide both physical care and, if you like, emotional care. How confident are you that we've got the spare capacity, that we've got the slack to pick up for these poor souls?
I'm not confident normally, Nick, in a normal conversation. But we've got to. And the way doctors and, well, actually, the way politicians, officials, doctors, everyone involved has stepped up to the plate here is fantastic. We will find the capacity. We have to.
Noting that your department isn't responsible for the visas and the other paperwork, there has been criticism, Lord Harrington, that in some instances these poor souls are meant to be able to produce a water bill or copy of a passport or a relative's passport or something like that and have to fill in fairly lengthy documents. I read 14, 15 pages. Again, this doesn't actually fall under you, but the Home Office. How fair is that in your view?
Nick, first of all, you've excused me from something that is my responsibility. I'm a Home Office Minister again, and but since I arrived 3 days ago in the job, we have revolutionised the visa process. From, I can't tell you exactly what time, but today there'll be a new system where people with a Ukrainian passport will be able to fill in it. And the form, by the way, is far too complicated. I mean, in a few days' time, that'll be a lot simpler. But they download their passport. They then get a response back from the Home Office, and we have teams of people working on it. I hope within 24 hours, it may be sooner, which gives them the right to travel. This is not a complicated visa process now. By the way, when the Prime Minister appointed me to the job, his only criteria was that we had to do security checks. Because they've been advised, I've not parted the advice, as I say, I've only been in the job for 3 or 4 days, but that we have to do security checks. And I can do that, and I can do that very quickly. The main thing is, these queuing up in visa centres is unacceptable. So just to finish, we're gearing up the numbers of people in the visa centres because people that don't have Ukrainian passports have had to leave their paperwork at home, whatever it is. We can then deal with them individually, and they will not have to wait in anything like the way they have had to do.
Just respond to this, if you would. I spoke yesterday with Guy Verhofstadt, who, of course, I'll remind you, was the key Brexit coordinator for the EU. He had this point about visas to enter the UK.
It's crazy that you have red tape when there is such a refugee crisis. For once, the European Union on this was a good example, because we have activated the so-called Temporary Protection Directive, which gives the possibility immediately for all these refugees to come in Europe, in Poland, but also in all other countries in the 27 member states. And then there is one country who is continuing to ask for a visa and is only allowing 4,000 people to come in when there are 2 million of refugees.
So a visa is still required, Lord Harrington?
Automatic visa, done very quickly, electronically. They don't need a visa to get in. They're given permission to travel. And then when they come and check in at the airports or wherever they are, they will go through, they will get stamped then with their leave to remain. And hopefully, I know they'll be welcomed properly and straight to where they're going to be living, and with all of the wraparound services which I've explained.
Lastly, after 6 months, the great British people who open their hearts and open their doors, after 6 months, are they meant to say to these folk, that's it, you must go? Is the government working to a percentage that will want to return to, please God, a safer Ukraine?
We just don't know, Nick, because of the circumstances. We honestly don't know. What we do know is that they're being given a right to remain here for 3 years. Actually, initially it's 6 months, but it's extended to 3 years. And that makes them entitled to all of the benefits that we are: education, health, right to work, etc.
Including housing, Lord Harrington?
Yes, including housing.
I mean, I don't need to tell you there's pressure on housing, isn't there?
There is big pressure on housing, and this is a big problem, Nick. And that's why in the first instance we're asking the British public to step forward, which they have. But there's no simple solution to this. I hope they can go home. We all do. They want to go home. But we have to react in a humane way, and in the way that many of our ancestors, including mine, found a way in this country. And I was brought up to believe this is the finest country in the world, the way we were accepted, and we have to show these Ukrainians that's exactly the same today.
How many Syrians did the country successfully settle in the end, Lord Harrington?
On the scheme I did, there were 20,000.
Right, OK. And one last unrelated matter. History shows that sometimes you have to do a deal with the devil. World War II ended because, of course, the alliance involving Stalin. Boris Johnson, as we speak, will be talking to Saudi Arabia about supplying oil. We all know their human rights records. Do you feel a bit uncomfortable about that, Lord Harrington?
Well, Nick, we've got a situation here. What Putin's done will lead to a significant shortage of energy in the world. The Saudis and others will step up to the plate, and I'm sure the Prime Minister's making the point to them about their human rights record. Every single minister does. And things slowly change. The United Arab Emirates, which he's visiting, they are making improvements on this front. They signed the Abraham Accords. They're now a voice for peace in the world. And I hope the Saudis are listening, and I hope they realise that being part of a world community of countries which give human rights is in the interest of them, and obviously in the interest of the rest of us.
But they executed 82 people last weekend, Richard.
Yeah, I know, absolutely appalling.
All right, I'm grateful. Sorry.
Thank you very much, Nick.
Thanks for your time. OK, thanks very much indeed. Richard, now Lord Harrington, Minister for Refugees, appearing here on LBC. Bit of a glitch at the end. Apologies for the bump in the line. 1 minute after 8, news is next.
On your radio, on Global Player, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom, Ukraine's president has struck an optimistic tone about talks with Russia, saying Moscow's demands are becoming more realistic. In his latest video address to the nation, Volodymyr Zelensky called for patience, with discussions resuming later. Russian shelling of major cities, including Kiev, is continuing. Andrei Osadchuk is a Ukrainian MP who's been speaking to Nick from the capital.
Russians are trying to block the city, but the city is huge. Quantity of Ukrainian army is huge. So that's why Russians are